Alright, we're here at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Jedi Cole for the recap of Fedcon USA. We're doing our little post-show show.
Yes. Well, I mean, where to start is kind of, we're at a loss. I mean, well, maybe we should start at where, what day and time it is. It's actually Saturday, day 2. Well, I guess what
would have been day 2
of the convention. And it's about, 5 o'clock in the afternoon? So,
take, yeah.
And the con's been over for 6 hours now. And it's...
And I'm afraid they called it at 11 a.m. this morning.
Time of death, 11 a.m.
11 a.m. And it took a little while to put the sheet over the top of it, but as you'll see on our coverage, or have seen on our coverage.
Yeah, one of the most creative things that they did was create new names for the con. Since FedCon has now pulled FedCon Germany rather, has pulled every tie it has with FedCon USA. Let's see, what were some of the names? They had FedCon.
FedCon was the popular one.
FracCon and FailCon.
Fail or failed con.
Fail or failed con, because, yeah. Those were the new names. I tentatively and lovingly call it Tim's FedCon, not this Tim, but Tim Brazil, who was the so-called coordinator, heart in the right place, brain was really did not get things in line.
Yes, fortunately, a lot of things in the discussions we had and in our interviews, we discovered that Tim had been working with FedCon Germany, the actual original FedCon in Europe, and had licensed the name, and they were in cooperation. And then at some point many months ago, FedCon Germany pulled out, at which point that should have been the end of this being called FedCon, I believe.
Yeah, and there was definitely an expectation of what FedCon Germany is. Now, the problem being, with Tim, Brazil, and Dirk of FedCon Germany, originally entered this in, as Cole said, in a partnership. As you'll also see in our coverage, that's admittedly the beginning of the end. That's where things really started to fray at the ends.
I think it seems to me that Tim was trying to recover. It lost the support of the parent group, but for some inexplicable reason they allowed him to maintain the use of their name, which probably was not the best, or certainly was not the best idea.
Well, especially
this thing
for them.
should have been forced to change names if it was going to happen at all. And I think to a certain degree, had they been forced to pull the name FedCon, they probably would have folded before they even got here.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe
It would have been
would've,
much harder for them to.
I think it would have helped to change the name to take some of that expectation away.
Absolutely.
But
I'd be afraid that they wouldn't have given the choice of having to come up with something new and just cashing in their chips. I would suspect they might well have cashed in their chips had they've been forced to. I think the fact that they could still bank on a name that had recognition, that really, as you say, it marked the beginning of the end.
Why don't we take it back to yesterday, because
Tim had the opportunity yesterday to be there for the first day of the show.
They actually completed the whole first day. I arrived at about, there was supposed to be a kickoff press conference at 3. I was there about 1:45. Had my equipment, had everything ready, backpack ready to go. Hauling in there, I go to the first person in a FedCon shirt that I see and say, hey, where is Stephen Barkholder, the press coordinator? And they're like, oh, I don't know where Stephen is. Let's go find him. And I was like, awesome. Sweet. You even shipped the Brits over to have a cool European con feel. And so I was like, awesome. But then nobody actually had Stephen's number. No one knew how to get Stephen's number. As it turned out, I was the only person there that had Stephen's number. I just didn't know it. Checked my email, gave him a call, left him a message. But by that time, he wandered in. And so I was the second press, not company, but we were the second press people there. And so he showed me where the press room was. There's a bunch of tables set up in there, so I'm thinking this is going to be a big thing. You know, where it's got probably 2, 4, 6, 8, about 8 tables in there, 8 6-foot tables, and I'm thinking this is just going to be like, you know, assembly line. Stars are going to do their thing. They're going to come in, do their press walk, 5 minutes maybe on each person, and boom, they're done for the weekend. Turns out, set up, had my tripod ready, had my camera ready, had it on standby, ready to go, at a click of a button, and never had to click the button. Actually, the most interesting footage I had was of a cool little dinosaur Pleo that was just awesome. And you'll see some of that, you know, in the con footage from day one. The rest of it's really just a report from me on what happened, you know, or what's going on right before I left the floor. Actually met some really cool people that we conversed with over the weekend. Charles from Fellowship of Fools, and both Chris and I believe it's Laura. I'm sorry, I probably screwed up your name. But from DVD Geeks as well. Both very cool, and we were all kind of floundering. We're going, there's no celebrities being brought in, because literally Ann Lockhart was the first one up on Friday. We're thinking, okay, we're talking to Steven, we're talking to Richard Anderson, the Bachelor ceremonies, we're talking to Chuck, who's Tim Brazile's son, and was the kind of impromptu leader of the con since Tim
he kind of
was
had to
out.
step into something he had nothing to do with to begin with, and suddenly he was sort of thrust into the go-to guy position.
Yeah.
And as you'll see in our interview, or have seen in our interviews, did a hell of a job.
Yeah, for what he was handed, whenever you're handed a burning basket, you know, you can't be blamed if you drop it. So, but sadly, Friday really kind of went along more the same. We spent about 3 hours waiting. 3 to 4 guests went up, came down, but they couldn't be herded into the room, and I'm going, this is kind of strange. You know, why? Their contracts say that they have to do press interviews, so why not just get them done and over with and out of the way, and we can move on. Come to find out, through the grapevine of things, that the money troubles that Tim Brazile posted about on the FedCon USA forums went way, way deeper than initially reported. Basically, they were having problems with the hotel. Now, I feel it's pertinent to point out, and it's been pointed out, you know, by multiple people over, you know, the course of this weekend, that, you know, hotel is key. You know, the venue is key.
Absolutely.
The venue is going to make or break your con in some cases. Now, the hotel, and I feel this is a little ludicrous, they demanded every penny and then some up front for the entire convention, all 3 days, up front. Over $20,000 just for the room costs. This did not include any food, this does not include any services, electricity, anything. So, but then they're also saying, we want $1,200 for electricity for this room, we want this for this room, we want that for that room. And lo and behold, the money for FedCon dried up. I don't think we kind of knew it on Friday. Came home Friday, wasn't real impressed with what I saw. I saw a silver lining though, you know, I saw the fact that even though there were some foibles, there were some issues, that the stars were kind of hanging around and trying to make the best of it. You know, like John Billingsley, Gigi Edgley, Garrett Wang, they're all interacting with the fans, trying to make the best of it. And at this point, there wasn't even 100 people that had shown up at the con. And, you know, trying to make the best of it. First year con, really wanted to work. But I have to say, end of day one, the only completed full day of the con was a pretty big disappointment from a press point of view. I did talk to some people who had some fun, you know, had a pretty good time on that day, but it was kind of one of those situations where they're trying to make the best of a bad situation. Any convention, any situation in life, you're going to be the author of your own story. You're going to be the determiner of your own destiny. If you expect to have a bad time, you will. If you expect to have a good time, you will. If you come in and things are running rough and you say, I'm going to have a good time regardless, or I'm going to do everything that I can, you're still going to have a good time. And those people, I think that they did.
Absolutely. That's a good point. And that I've been hanging around the Dallas Fort Worth convention scene for nearly 20 years now, and actually over 20 years now, nearly 30 years now, and well over 20 years, but not quite 30. And I have seen a convention move venues the day of the show. I've arrived at a hotel and been told, no, this isn't where the show is anymore, and told where to go. I've heard tales of shows closing literally the night before. Oftentimes leaving a lot of other people holding the bag. Thankfully, I didn't have my heart set on those shows, wasn't going out there in the first place, found out about it later. One of the biggest consensus opinions was those of us who've been around for years and years and doing this, especially in this area, never have we even heard of a show closing after it opened, midstream like this. It's unheard of. That they were trying to keep the show afloat until enough people showed up and paid them enough money that they could start paying for some of the other stuff that they still owed while the show was going on. That seemed to be what was going on when we arrived today.
Well, I guess that brings us into day 2.
This is
So,
after day 1. We originally planned to get out there early. We're going to be good professional press and arrive at the crack of dawn and be ready for everything.
but then
Tim's
day 1
experience,
happened.
yes, the night before, he calls up and says, look, how about we go in a little later? Turns out we left probably later even then than we intended.
But we arrived right on time.
We did arrive in the nick of time as we were literally walking up to the hotel. Who was it?
Charles from Fellowship of Fools.
Is maybe 30, 40 feet away from us, and he's shaking his head. And I thought, this cannot be good. Someone who recognizes Tim immediately is looking straight at Tim saying, no, you're not going to be happy.
And he knows it's one of two things. Either they found out what I did, or things at the con got worse.
Yeah, and unfortunately things at the con got worse.
Almost wanted it to be the first one, honestly.
We were told that we were told that things had gone from bad to worse. Still, there's still something there. It's not great, but there's something to cover.
Then Mark walks up.
Yes, Mark Walters comes up and drops the major bombshell.
Or it didn't even happen then. We were just we were lamenting on the state of things. I asked, is it even worth being here today? And they said, no, not really. So, but we walk in anyway. Figure we're gonna at least get some stock coverage, some little reporting, and
we brought the camera. We may as well do something to tell people we were there.
Somebody walks up to Mark.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't Mark himself.
And like whispers a few words in his ear, and he goes, "Canceled? What?" And it was just like, we're all going,
huh.
Oh my God.
And meanwhile, nearby in the main ballroom, there's definitely something going on.
Well, they're about to announce it like right now.
Yeah, so we went charging into the ballroom. Billingsley was up on stage giving a presentation. If you had walked in with no clue at all, you would have thought you're coming in midstream on one of the celebrity presentations and probably taking your seat and thought, well, I'm going to get in on the tail end of this, see who's next on stage, enjoy myself. This isn't the best con in the world, but let's see what's going on.
But then you see a 6'4" man in a red T-shirt and blue jean shorts and boots running in, desperately trying to set up a camera. Something is about to go down.
And then there was a 6'2" man frantically running in behind him, trying to help him get the tripod opened up and hold the camera and everything. As certainly somebody those who could see us were probably wondering, what is this all about? Why so much excitement over the tail end of somebody else's presentation?
But lo and behold, Richard Anderson, the Master of Ceremonies, very, very cool guy, is standing on the side of the stage, very politely, with a look of foreboding doom written all over his
He
face.
certainly looked like someone who had something to say.
And
then he did.
Then the clock struck 11, and all was not heaven. They basically, Richard took the stage and made a very just
somber pronouncement, basically.
Yes.
He came out and apologetically announced, as of 10 minutes earlier, Fedcon USA was officially canceled.
And
But
the pin drops could have been heard from
you
the back of the
probably
room
could hear
to
it
the front.
through the entire hotel. You always have some ambient noise, so you had a crowd of between 150 200 people in the room. Everything was dead silence. I don't think anyone believed in that moment what they were hearing.
Well, I knew it was coming, and I still was hoping that they were gonna, something miraculous was gonna happen. They were just gonna say, you know what, we're gonna make it work.
That's right. We're going to draw. It's going to be like a sitcom. My God, we're going to make it happen regardless.
Yeah.
And
But the revelation never
unfortunately,
came.
life doesn't work that way, and they were probably too far in the red from the moment he took the stage, and getting more so. And so, of course, immediately, what next?
Yeah, it was almost as if as soon as it started to sink in, people, I almost wish I was in the front. Our coverage, as you'll see, is in the back, covering what's happening on the stage. One thing I could have done differently, I probably would have been in the front of the room. But John Billingsley had his finger right on the pulse, and I think he saw what was about to happen. 200 people may not be a lot in the grand scheme of a con, but 200 people trying to hurt one man or one set of small people is
Kill
more
the
than
messenger.
Yeah, more than enough. And he jumped in superhero style, and he's like, "This is what we're gonna do. You know what? It's at this time that we're gonna open the floor up for questions."
He took mic in hand. He called the show itself down, and said, "You need your people on this stage. You need your financial man in here to explain how these good people are going to get their money back. And when you need anyone directly involved with the production in here to answer the questions that your Master of Ceremonies doesn't have the knowledge to answer." And he also pledged his own personal support as a strong advocate of the fans who had arrived and were expecting a show. Many of these people came from our local area, but a show of the magnitude that this looked like it was going to be initially was attracting people from all over the country, and indeed in other countries.
Japan and Canada. There was somebody who spent well over $2,000 on a plane ticket for this show from Japan. Somebody who spent almost $2,000 coming from Canada. She was upset to the point where she proclaimed to the world that she would put on a con at half the price. Same con, same guests, and I'm going, oh, you poor misguided soul. But you know what? Things are said in the spirit of
the moment. And
yes, exactly. That, no one expects her really to put on a con. If she does, we're going to actually contact her.
Yeah, we'll be there. We'll be on board. We'd be happy to lend whatever support we can, because that's part of what we're doing here. Is we're very passionate about these conventions. Certainly hope so. We need
definitely
more of them. And
let's see, Billingsley jumps in.
He really did a good job of kind of playing both sides. I was speaking to Tim earlier today. It's very much a fine line between advocacy and incitement, and he very easily could have crossed the line into incitement, in sort of getting the crowd
Stoked to the point of riot.
But I will applaud him in that pushed himself admirably back into the side of advocacy by pointing out some very key things, not the least of which was that Tim Brazil's son, who had come down to try to run the show while his dad was in the hospital, who basically inherited something he knew nothing about only a few days earlier, said, you know, here's the person who's going to do what he can for you, but bear in mind, this is not his doing. So please approach him with respect for the fact that this is not his production, but he's going to do what he can to help. And I applauded that.
And as you can also see for our coverage, we have an exclusive interview with John Billingsley, who really pretty much sums up what he says in the announcement area.
In fact, it was taped not 5 minutes after
Yes.
they finally wrapped on the big group announcement and the Q&A, during which he demanded that he essentially announced, we're going to be here till all questions are answered, which, you know, was remarkable for somebody who was there as a show guest to step up to the plate and said, you know, you're going to be held accountable, you're going to stand here and you're going to make this work no matter what.
Well, I think at that point, though, the con organizers were so beaten. They were just so, they'd given up at this point. They wanted somebody else to take the lead.
Yes,
they
I think that helped a lot.
They did not want to be in charge anymore. And the thing about this, it really speaks volumes for why this con failed. It's not necessarily the character of the people, but it's just they did not have a leader. It was a bunch of people trying to do the best that they could. Yet, I mean, it's like...
On Friday night, I think Tim put it best. He said the show was a snake without a head.
Exactly.
The head was in another part of the country. And
the brains who knew everything about this operation, but nobody knew how to run it. There was no hope for the con from the minute they opened the door. It was just that it was over before it started. And I mean, they pretty much come out and say that we were in a very bad place beginning well before the con started.
I think that the more they tried to rescue it, the more things happened that were either inevitable or unpredictable.
It's also the first year con curse, which they did not take into account. If there is something that can go wrong, it will go wrong in your first year.
And ironically, their first day was Friday the 13th, which is rather unfortunate.
Yeah, I think it's more incidental because, I mean, let's be honest. Friday the
Absolutely,
13th
but if
has no bearing except
do not
for the Jason
have
movie.
your first con on a Friday the 13th. I think this is something we can take away from that.
Yeah.
Open on
Pick a
any
different
day.
year. If you
Yeah.
have to have it that day, like not the 13th, that
Try the
day
next
and
week, you know,
yeah.
and it'll be much safer.
Yeah, and the devil will be back in his hole.
That's right.
But
the devil was definitely in the details on this one, and I think that a lot of the details were overlooked by someone. I think most people, when they approach a convention or they go to a convention, it sounds like Tim Brazil had been an avid convention goer.
mm-hmm.
And it's easy to perceive a lot of what goes on at a convention and think, oh, I could do that.
Then you try to do it, and still, it seems like any time that I've ever done this, because literally, whenever I started VaderCast, God, it's been almost 2 years ago. Whenever I started VaderCast, it was in that same spirit. I listened to things that I enjoy and thought to myself, I could do that. I could do that better. And so, you know, but then again, I found myself out, you know, a good little bit of money because of just stuff that I knew had to be in place, hosting, this kind of stuff. Try to do that on a scale 1,000 times larger. You know,
Or 10,000 times larger.
if I make a mistake like that, I may be out $1,000, you know, for all equipment involved. You do that with a convention and a space that large, you're out $20,000 day one. Before day one, your day zero, you're done. You're sunk. And I mean, there's nobody that could have recovered from that.
I think that it would not be outrageous to assume that before a single person bought a ticket, And granted, all the money wouldn't have been spent at once, but by the time that their expenses that they had to have up front were probably easily 40 grand.
Oh yeah. Well,
And then as ticket sales come in, and then the thing is canceled, then all the money that came in that was going to help cover a lot of those expenses, that money is spent. It's gone. That 40 grand is in the ether. And now you're having to give back. Let's say you've taken in 15 grand ahead of the show. You got to give all that back. You took in, say, another 10 grand at the show. That all goes away. You are
100 grand in the hole.
Yeah.
Well, 90 grand in the hole.
easily.
And so, you know,
That's a very hard thing to have to walk away from. And
we don't want to give away too much because we want you to watch the
Yeah.
features. But let's move on to after that. Because after that is that's when the action started. That's when that was the word go.
we
From the time.
determined that at this point we'd come to cover a show and we were going to do something.
And we were going to do it damn well.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely. Now, at this point, the hotel was goodly enough to allow the convention a couple of rooms where they could continue a few operations. We understand, like, for example, the dealer room. The dealers were clearing out in less than an hour after the show was canceled, like maybe 11:45. One of the dealers told us that the hotel turned off the air conditioning in the dealer room. We left around 4:30. We were heading out to pack up the car around 4:30 or so. There were still a couple of dealers still packing down.
that's 4 hours of no air conditioning and carrying heavy stuff out to loading dock
Yes.
in the summer heat.
And it was
That's
not
inhuman.
pretty
That's
in there.
inhuman.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that I really think the hotel really dropped the ball on and
Well-
really could be held accountable for being unprofessional, it was that.
Because it really detracted from any plus to, like, oh, we're generously going to give you this room. Arguably, I think, though, that if the hotel was genuinely demanding every penny that the show had to pay them, had to pay the Hyatt rather personally, we can beat that out, had to pay the hotel personally in advance. The hotel had been paid for 3 days. They had no business telling the convention just because the convention had closed. Now, I don't know all the details. The hotel may have said, okay, you're closing, we'll refund you X amount of money. But at any rate, at the point, at 11 a.m. this morning, the hotel had 3 days worth of money. They had been paid for those rooms. I don't care if they were sucking air. They needed to be air conditioning every single one of those rooms, even if there was nothing in there but an ant.
Yeah, and granted, the hotel probably did not get all it was owed. Granted, but there are human decency limits that should be adhered to, and this is bleeping Texas in June.
Yes.
If you ever want any kind of large group, because I know people that organize large events. I know somebody that's looking to organize a large event, non-comic book related or con related, in Dallas, and they were thinking about doing it at the airport. And personally, I will not be recommending any of these chain.
No, absolutely not. Again, what they didn't do detracted from what they did do. All of their generosity was pretty much thrown out the window. They were so anxious to empty these rooms. And the other thing I would argue is these rooms were booked for 3 days.
Who
You
do
don't
have
have
coming
somebody waiting to get into that room. You're going to have to pay your staff to empty all those chairs and tables and stages on Sunday. Does it matter if the room that's going to be empty anyway? I doubt there's a waiting list just in case the major convention folds
Yeah,
to
the
get in
minor
those rooms.
convention
You
is
don't
waiting.
have somebody waiting. If it was Sunday afternoon and some of the dealers were still dragging their heels and the hotel needed to get set up for a big conference on Monday, little bit different story. I could see turning the screws a bit. But this wasn't a room that's going to arguably lay empty for a day and a half
They were
with
doing it.
nobody in it, and that was just pretty much
Yeah.
very, very bad, poorly played.
Moving on to what the hotel did do, in addition to, providing letting them use a room free of charge, from what the con organizers tell us. Actually, no, we skipped, well, no. basically during the announcement they talked about the organization, or how things were going to play out. That there was one room left where all the stars was going to be. Stars did not get paid what they were supposed to. Now, if anything at all. I'm pretty sure they tried to be as fair as possible. They tried to pay everybody at least something, but I know for a fact that they all didn't get paid exactly. So they said, let's make the best of a bad situation. Not like we can really, I mean, what are we going to do? Go sit and stand by, at the American Airlines terminal? They said, well, we can help alleviate some of this pain for the fans, not for the con, but for the fans, and do some signings. Literally, this was more signing time than they were scheduled for all weekend. And they were there of their own free will. They were there, the goodness of their hearts.
Those who stayed and signed, absolutely seek these guys out. Get their autographs wherever they are, even if you've already got them.
We'll post a list of everybody
absolutely.
who did on the website. I'm just so many names in there, so many great people.
Yeah, and we would probably forget somebody if we try to do it from memory. So we will post. Look for that.
But there is coverage of there. You will see our exclusive interview with John Billingsley that was directly after the announcement. He gives us about 15 minutes of just absolutely great information. I mean, he's candid, he's honest, he's not ugly, but he makes some very strong statements and he makes some very good points.
Absolutely, and he's a seasoned con guest, so he's certainly somebody who isn't speaking from, well, this is my first time and it stunk. He's done conventions all over the place. All over the U.S. and apparently he's done several of the European Fedcons as well, which he said the Fedcon Europe, Germany, those guys are on the ball.
They're awesome.
Yeah, they're wonderful, and certainly he's anxious to do more conventions. I think a lot of the guests were very anxious to come back and do other shows. They certainly didn't sour any of them, was the impression we got.
And shortly following that, Tim Brazil's son, Charles Chuck Chaz, the guy who was left holding the bag, he comes in and gives us a very honest. At one point, he's a little bit even emotional in there, talking about he's going to support his dad out of his own pocket,
he's going to do what he can to help everybody, make sure everybody gets
a refund, and that putting yourself up there like that's a financial unknown, because granted this con had a budget, they said, of $30,000. 20 grand was just hotel. Over 10 grand, he stated, was in airline tickets that were canceled.
Yeah,
that they
one of the
could
places
not
that they
get
lost,
refunds on.
Absolutely, a lot of their money they lost was from guests who canceled or that they thought were going to cancel. They canceled the tickets, they lost money, they paid fees on every one of those tickets, which is one of the burdens of putting on a show like this. And then we got some wonderful interviews with a lot of other folks who were there at the show.
Well, we started with Lewis Johnson, author of Escape Number 2 Earth. Very cool sci-fi premise. We spoke with him, talked about a lot about potentially promoting,
Absolutely.
and
he was
helping
very
to
excited to be on the show with us, and gave a wonderful interview. It was a lot of fun to talk to, and in fact, hung out with us a while after we stopped rolling camera, which we kind of wish we'd kept the camera on a little longer. But I made some notes, and I'll be actually been doing a written piece as well as a companion. Had a great chance to sit down and talk to Mark Walters, who is one of the big movers and shakers in the DFW area. In the conventions, he and Ben Stevens produced the Sci-Fi Expos and Dallas Comic Cons.
Star Wars Fan Days.
And Star Wars Fan Days 2 coming up in October. Got to sit down with him. He happened to be at the show, and I've known Ben and Mark for many years, and Mark was goodly enough to sit down and talk to us, and our cohort Rick, who also does Amazing Comic Cast, though he would deny it, he is green with envy that we got an interview with Brian Denham.
Green like Hulk.
Yeah, so who's actually gave us a little bit of insight. His new book just coming out in a couple of months. He's doing an X-Files comic. He's illustrating an X-Files comic which is written by one of the producers of the series. Should be some good stuff, and we'll probably throw Rick a bone and do a story about the X-Files at a later point.
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially.
If he's good.
If he's good.
But anyways, after the interview with not Louis, Larry, or Lawrence, we actually took a trip down to where all the celebs were, because we actually hadn't been down there yet. And we walked in, and like this room is how a con should have run, like the whole con, because it's a very large square or rectangular room. All of the tables are along the edges, and you've got fans just making their way down both sides to the main, to the end.
Tables with all the guests, at least those who were still around.
Right, and the headliners were behind a black curtain, because they're special.
Actually, the black curtain was, they were doing the photo ops.
Oh, my bad.
Earlier in the day when I come to round up people who were coming to interview or coming to talk to us, everybody was out in the room. A couple of the actors were then sort of herded off behind the magic curtain for professional photography with you.
And the very cool thing
the
that they were
con-goer
doing
in the picture.
Well, what they were doing is they weren't selling the pictures anymore. They were selling the opportunities. But what normally doesn't happen is they're sending the fan the JPEG so they can make as many photos as they want. It's very cool. It's literally like unlimited amounts
and you could
of
take
photos.
as many pictures as you wanted too. They were
Exactly.
charging like
$10
if
to
you had a
$15.
ticket, it was $20. If you didn't have a ticket, it was $40.
Oh, okay.
At least for the two Klingon actors.
Right. Well, the photo ops were a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
Like.
Oh, it was
For more
$10 with your camera, and then $20 or $40 respectively, if you had their professional photographer who was there to do this.
Now this is I do take small issue with with charging for photo ops. If it's professionally done, that's one thing. You're paying for somebody who knows how to take a good picture to take one. Now, for using your camera, I take large issue with that because
that is a bit dubious.
Every other con in this area, and it just, I don't know, even some of the bigger cons like Dragon Con, like ones that have been around for a while, you get your signature, and then almost in 99% of the cases...
Oh yeah, almost always if you ask nicely, the celebrities will say, yeah, come on around the table and take your picture.
While we were in the photo op room, which was now the guest room, we ran into some girls we knew from AllCon, and really kind of let them make a bit of a reaction versus a comparison, and also give their thoughts on why DFW conventions, this is the absolute exception in the bad way. All the rest of the cons that are in this area that come off successfully, I mean, it's been a while since a con has just flat out failed here.
Absolutely, it's been a number of years, well over a decade, almost 20 years now, since the con just folded up and went away. And I think that's a good point you bring up, is a lot of people who came here from other parts of the country, or people who didn't come to this and maybe visited the message boards, the forums of FedCon, don't let FedCon USA be the benchmark for shows in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This should absolutely not color your opinion of going to FinCon, AllCon, Sci-Fi Expo and Dallas Comic-Con, Con DFW, any number of conventions. ACON, Anime Fest, Texas Frightmare Weekend,
Swap Meets.
Apotex Comic Toy and Collectible Swap Meet, yeah!
That'll be $10.
Just put it on my tab.
Yeah. But whenever we got in there, after we did, their kind of reaction to it, we got a little bold and actually walked up to Gigi Edgley, an Aussie actress.
Yes, from
Absolutely,
Farscape.
From Farscape, yes. Absolutely a doll. She gave a full, it was a 15-minute interview.
Easily.
Pushing 20. And we were talking to her about all kinds of things. Got a new comic coming out. She's actually got a new comic. She's got a CD. Yeah. She called it an EP. I was like, wow, that's old school. A set of stories coming out. She's just so creative, so nice. And she gives us the inside track on everything that she's doing, and not too hard on the eyes either.
I wasn't going to embarrass Tim any more than he embarrasses himself on the video footage.
Oh yeah, well she's sweating me pretty hard because she's about this close. We're both angled like this, and we're literally like her shoulder is into mine, and she, wow, just right here. The whole she's a very, very close, very well. It says a lot about her. She's a very trusting person because her proximity is very small. Her personal space is almost non-existent.
Yeah, and I don't think the people who were helping her were too thrilled with us coming over, but she was just absolutely, hey, I'll hop up there. I'll come over and talk to you. I don't care what our helper says. I want to.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to be part of this, and
then,
I thought that was really nice because a lot of times the people who are assigned to the celebrities get a little possessive of their celebrity. They don't want people coming and messing with them or playing with their toys, and she was all for it. Says you're here to help me, but I'm here for me, so I'm gonna do what I want.
She's like, what?
Mom.
Yeah. It's like, what? Sci-fi podcast show? Promotion? I write sci-fi, let's do this. And so, she was all about it. She was a doll. And then, after that,
After that, we went to Mark.
To Mark.
And then to Brian, we're right next to Brian's table, and he was busily drawing Spider-Man on a baseball cap.
Perfectly.
Absolutely. It was amazing to watch that thing go from a white front on a baseball cap.
Trucker cap.
Trucker cap, yes. To Spider-Man and color. With all different colors and flourishes and
10 minutes.
Yeah, it was just, where did that come from? And he just would occasionally do a little sketch on a piece of paper to kind of give himself an idea where he was headed. And just amazing to watch the man work. We probably should have trained the camera on that for a while, but we were busy doing other things.
Oh yeah, we would have been there. Well, at that time they were trying to hurt us out.
Yeah.
One thing that wasn't on film was actually. I had the opportunity to talk with the creator, or one of the co-creators, writer, producer, director of the web episode sci-fi show IQ 145, Billy Dixon. And he was insanely cool, extraordinarily disappointed as we all were with the fate of the Fedcon. But he was more than happy to talk with us, and give us just an open-ended invitation to give him a call, talk about IQ 145. He said he's totally open to phone interviews, and he may be even able to get one of the stars of the show, to talk with us. And so it was an extraordinary weekend and as I said, the best non-con experience I've ever had.
I think that being able to be there, I think had someone had given us a call and said the show's off, I don't know that a lot of what we were able to cover would have ever happened. I think arriving when we were essentially told it's gone from bad to worse, and next thing we know we're hearing whispers of the show being canceled, and we were literally at the right place at the right time. Tim put it very well that this was historic, that we were able to kind of jump in on the ground floor of something that might have been while it was falling apart, which is unfortunate. We're not here to say, point any fingers or set any blame. There's going to be enough of that going on, but we're hoping with this to give some insight from everybody's standpoint. Unfortunately, could not get a lot of convention attendee standpoint. A lot of people, you start pointing a camera in their face, they're already a little ticked off. They don't really want to talk about it. But we did try to get a little bit of everybody's perspective. Unfortunately, except the dealers who were having to get out rather quickly.
Right.
We didn't want to, as a dealer, I don't want to waste a dealer's time if they have to get out in a hurry.
And I honestly think we got a very good amount of information. I think you guys will be really happy, or at least very interested to watch a train wreck as it happens. And it's something that you'll see. I mean, it's almost Cloverfield style. Things are going okay, but it's kind of tense, and then just everything happened at once.
Broke loose for them, and in a way, it was sort of a good thing. This was going to be our first in-depth coverage of a convention, and to be able to. One of the things we talked about today was just because there wasn't a convention didn't mean there wasn't a story. And that's why we kept cameras rolling. That's why we kept looking for people to interview. We were there to cover this, and even though the show proper didn't happen, we weren't going to be able to, give props to what could have been a very fun weekend, something that could be repeated next year. Unfortunate, but there's still something to be told. People need to have the experience that weren't there and see both sides of what conventioning can be.
My goal for this series of videos that we've shot is kind of twofold. There's a lesson to be learned here, and I jokingly was talking about calling this FedCon a cautionary tale, but that name it shouldn't be a negative thing.
No.
It's a lesson to be learned, and it's like Cole said, people need to see whenever things are at their worst. They have to have this experience, like Cole said. But when things are at their worst, great things still happen. People are resilient, and people that you put up on a pedestal and you think that they're God, they know what fans want, and they're willing to give of themselves. I mean, my props to John Billingsley.
Absolutely. Billingsley was absolutely the top man of the show. He really came to bat for the fans. He did absolutely everything he could. He and a lot of his fellow celebrities really gave it their all. I'm sure deep down, every single one of them had to be furious, but they weren't going to put that face in front of their fans. And a lot of times, a lot of celebrities are sort of faceless. We all like to say, well, if it wasn't for us fans, you'd be nobody. And that is largely true for a lot of them. But it's nice to see when you get some of these guys who genuinely appreciate that, and not only will tell you that, but they'll go out of their way to prove it.
And I want to point out one last thing before we finish this up. John Billingsley was the very last celebrity in that room. They had to come and tell him to leave twice.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as we were finally getting all of our stuff out the door, he and his wife were actually finally, whether they were leaving the hotel or just going to their room or what have you, but they were just heading out. Literally, we were in their wake. So he stuck around and talked to a lot of people even after he was thrown out of the room.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Like I said, this is just the icing on the cake here. There's a lot of meat. We hope that you learned something from this, that con promoters or potential con promoters and organizers even watch this and understand that even with a name like FedCon, it all doesn't go right.
And show promoters, potential show promoters, invite us out.
Yes, because
let us come cover your show. If we're going to cover a show that didn't happen, imagine what we can do for a show that does happen. Come to VaderCast.com, www.VaderCast.com. We're anxious to do a lot more of this. This was our first outing for this, and we'd like your show to be next.
Absolutely.
And for those of you also, another point I really want to make, attend shows. If there's a convention, a fan interest, if there are guests you're interested in, go attend shows, because that's how they keep coming back.
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, well, I'll go next year. There may be a no next year.
Exactly. Well, that wraps it up for us. I'm Tim Kennedy.
I'm Cole Houston.
This has been VaderCast.
The show about the Little Big convention that almost was.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.